Test. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, did you tell them that I'll just post it?
I will now.
Okay.
Very strange.
We've lost internet. Ross
We'll post later.
will record or is recording. You're gonna have to. Is the recording still going?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the recording's
You're
good.
gonna have to edit it out.
That's easy. I can.
I'll wait till after we're done to ask my questions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, don't mess with me now. I'm on a roll.
I ain't gonna mess with you. They get you off kilter, you'll never get back.
Okay, so I'm gonna pick back up here, and then, like we said, we'll post it later. So the idea about a human king is not native. I was discussing, and what we find is that God could have at that point said, you know, I did say in Deuteronomy 17 that they're going to ask for a king, and here we are. They've asked for a king, so give them a king. But what he tells them instead is, go ahead and give them what they ask for, but write this down, which Samuel does, and he puts it in a book. So if you look at 1 Samuel chapter 10, 1 Samuel chapter 10 and verse 25. And Samuel expounded to the people the rules of the monarchy and recorded them, this says, in a document which he deposited before the Lord. What it actually says is he put them in the scroll, which is clearly talking about, he adds it to what is already there. So this is what I propose, is that this is when the monarchy comes in. But prior to this, at least according to the Torah, all we have in terms of the anointed one is clearly a priest. It's clearly a priest. So now, Leviticus, particularly in chapters 1 through 7, because we're dealing with sacrifices, the subject of blood is a major part of this. The proper handling of blood, the prohibition of consuming blood in any way. You know, all of this is treated in Vayikra, in Leviticus. And the reason is because the life is in the blood. And we now know, I mean, scientifically, that blood carries oxygen and so forth. So there's probably a lot more in terms of scientific that could be said. But in terms of the ancient Near East and the biblical text, they just knew that the life was in the blood. This was probably learned through the painful lesson of seeing the life seep out and the life gone. Clearly you put two and two together. But blood is not always associated with the forgiveness factor. Now, I grew up hearing that there must be the death of something and the shedding of blood in order to get this forgiveness. Now, the question becomes, is that true? Is it supported by Levitical literature? Because if it is supported, if blood is required for the forgiveness factor, then we have to ask the question that will come up later in the class. But if it's not required, it's a whole nother conversation. So go with me to Leviticus chapter 5. Leviticus chapter 5. You might want to tell them they should all just move to St. Francisville, and no problem. That's their fault they live in other places. Leviticus chapter 5, beginning in verse 5. Let me make sure that's right. Okay. Are we back live?
Some people say it's back. We can see you again. Glad you're back.
Okay, if I'm back, and if you're watching and listening, forgive me for making that joke about you not living here. But no, we'll post the audio and you can catch up. That's why you have to be careful. Okay, here we go. Leviticus chapter 5 and verse 4. The audio, by the way, the audio will be flawless. I'll edit this out later. Leviticus chapter 5, verse 4. When a person utters an oath to bad or good purpose, whatever a man may utter an oath, and though he has known it, the fact has escaped him, but later he realizes his guilt in any of these matters. When he realizes his guilt in any of these matters, he shall confess that wherein he has sinned. That's the end of a series of crimes or sins, and I'm just picking up here. He shall bring as his penalty to Jehovah, for the sin of which he is guilty, a female from the flock, sheep or goat as a sin offering, and the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for his sin, right? So the first thing is, if this person sins and they know it, they realize it, they bring their offering, and this offering will be used as the forgiveness factor, expiation for the sin. Verse 7, but if his means do not suffice for a sheep, he shall bring to Jehovah as his penalty for that which he has committed 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a sin offering, the other for a burnt offering. He's going to bring them to the priest, who shall offer first the one for the sin offering, pinching its head at the nape without severing it. Verse 9, he shall sprinkle some of the blood of the sin offering on the side of the altar, and what remains of the blood shall be drained out at the base of the altar. It's a sin offering. And the second, he shall prepare as a burnt offering according to regulation. So the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for sin, which he is guilty, and he'll be forgiven. So here we go. If you commit this sin, you're guilty. You realize it. You bring the sheep. And through the ritual slaughter and the blood is treated a certain way, you are forgiven. But if you don't have the means, you don't have a sheep. You say, well, I don't have enough money for a sheep. But I'm sorry. I mean, I want forgiveness. So what do? Well, you said, what, do you have 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons? Yeah, I have that. Well, bring that. So that's what you do if you don't have enough money for a sheep. Pigeons are cheaper than sheep. All right, now, let's say you don't have enough for 2 pigeons. Are you just, what do? Are you just not going to be forgiven? Verse 11, and if his means do not suffice for 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, he shall bring as his offering for that of which he is guilty 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a sin offering. He shall not add oil to it or lay frankincense on it, for it's a sin offering. He's going to bring the flour to the priest, and the priest shall scoop out of it a handful as a token portion of it, and turn it on to smoke on the altar with the Lord's offering by fire. It is a sin offering. Thus the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for whichever of these sins he's guilty, and he shall be forgiven. It shall belong to the priest like the meal offering. So you're telling me that if a person has sin and they want to achieve forgiveness and they don't have money for a sacrifice and there's no blood involved, that he can still be forgiven? Yeah. At least according to this text. Now, some serious questions arise from a study of the detailed sacrificial material contained within Levitical literature of the Pentateuch. Do these Torat Kohanim, these instructions of priest, reflect authentic Mosaic legislation? In other words, it's not suggested. We showed in the beginning, it's hard to place it chronologically within the text itself. But do they at least go back to Sinai? Do they at least go back to Moses? Did this sacrificial system exist in Moses' day as it's described in the Bible? It's a serious question. Is forgiveness dependent on sacrifices, whether animal, blood, or flour. Do you have to have that in order to attain pardon from God? I mean, this is a question. Does God need, want, or desire sacrifice, whether blood or not, for sins that are either intentional or unintentional? And if He does, what do we do about the last 2,000 years? I mean, if it's required, if it's something that God needs, wants, desires, what do we do about, because it's been 2,000 years. Has it, what does it say about all of those people, the achievement of forgiveness over those intervening 2,000 years, and has the method that they have used, including me, you, everybody listening, has that been effectual? Are you forgiven? It's a big question. If we read the Levitical literature, we understand that forgiveness is not, you can't just, repentance is not enough without a sacrifice. According to Levitical literature, it's not enough. The mechanism of drawing near to God through ritual slaughter disappeared violently 2,000 years ago. Listen, 2,000 years ago. It's gone. The fire that Leviticus 6:6 says is not to be extinguished, it is to be burning forever and ever and ever, is gone. And the altar upon which the fire was to burn is gone. The temple, its cult, all of its details today only remain a literary record long gone. Interestingly, I should say, the prophetic reading attached to this week's portion, every Torah portion has a prophetic reading attached to it. Let's read a verse or two from the one that's attached to this reading about slaughter. Go with me to Jeremiah chapter 7. If you missed a few minutes in there, it's going to be on the audio, and you need to go back and listen. I'll just tell you, because I revealed the secret of the ages in that intervening part when you weren't listening. Jeremiah 7, verse 21. And it says, "Thus says Jehovah of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings to your other sacrifices and eat the meat. For when I freed your fathers from the land of Egypt, I did not speak with them or command them concerning burnt offering or sacrifice." He says, I didn't speak, I didn't command your fathers in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning Olah v'zavak. Olah is burnt offering. He gives it in the plural form, basically possessive, but I'm just giving you the root word. In other words, he says, I didn't talk to you, I didn't command you, I didn't speak with your fathers about burnt offering or sacrifice when I brought them out of Egypt. Now, I know a lot of people look for ways to make that be okay. Like they say, well, not technically the day. Talk to them about a few months later. Well, this is more difficult than that. This is suggesting something else. Look at chapter 6, verse 20 of Deuteronomy. I'm going to go through a few of these quickly. What need have I of frankincense that comes from Sheva, or fragrant cane from a distant land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable. Your sacrifices are not pleasing to me. Now, before people get ahead of me and say, well, that's because their heart wasn't right. As soon as they get their heart right, everything's going to be okay. That's the problem. It's not with sacrifice and offering, Ross. You're misleading the people. Stay with me. Stay with me. Question is, does God need, want, or desire them then, now, or in the future? Here in Jeremiah 6, burnt offerings, lo l'ratzon, and your sacrifices, lo arvu. He's saying they're not pleasing, they're not acceptable. Now, in this, where it says lo l'ratzon in Jeremiah 6, verse 20, that is used only one other place, and it's from Leviticus 22:20. And in Leviticus 22:20, just put this in your notes, it says basically that if you bring a blemished animal as a sacrifice, it's not acceptable to me. Lo l'ratzon. But here in Jeremiah 6, verse 20, it says you're just in general, they're not acceptable at all, whether blemished or not. Go with me to Amos, the prophet Amos chapter 5. Amos, Hosea, Joel, Amos chapter 5, verse 21. I loathe, I spurn your festivals. I'm not appeased by your solemn assemblies. If you bring me burnt offerings or your meal offerings, I will not accept them. I will pay no heed to your gifts of fatlings. Spare me the sound of your hymns. Let me not hear the music of your lutes, but let justice well up like water, righteousness like an unfailing stream. Did you offer sacrifice and oblation to me those 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? Did he? Now, most people would say, well, yeah, we did. Amos's question implies that they didn't. Stick with me. Go now. By the way, it says, I will not accept or be pleased. That's the same word, ratzah. In verse 25, did you bring me zevach and mincha? Zevach is slaughter, sacrifice, typically translated sacrifice. Did you bring me slaughter and mincha, offering, in the wilderness? He says, I will not accept or be pleased is a translation. But in Hebrew, God says, I will not look. In other words, God's not even going to look at what they're doing. Like it's, it's in Hebrew, it's Aleph, Beit, Yud, Tet, Avit. I will not look at. Now, if God says, I'm not going to look towards your sacrifice, what does that mean? What is it that God will look to? Go with me to Isaiah 66. Isaiah 66. I'll tell you what God's looking to and what he's looking for. Thus says Jehovah, verse 1. The heaven is my throne. Earth is my footstool. Where could you build a house for me? What place could serve as my abode? All this was made by my hand, and thus it all came into being, declares Jehovah. Yet to such a one I will look, same Hebrew word, to the poor and brokenhearted, who is concerned about my word. As for those who slaughter oxen and slay humans, this is a bad translation. It literally says, for those who slay an ox, let me pull up my Bible here and look at the Hebrew. This is typical of translations who want to avoid something theological. Listen to this. He who slaughters an ox is like one who kills a man. He who sacrifices a lamb like one who breaks a dog's neck. He who presents grain offering like one who offers pig's blood. He who makes memorial offering of frankincense like one who blesses an idol. These have chosen their own ways, and their soul delights in their abominations. So it sounds like, look at verse 4, I will also choose harsh treatment for them and bring their fears upon them, because when I called, no one answered. When I spoke, they didn't listen, but they did what was evil in my eyes and chose that which I did not delight. You know what he says he doesn't delight in? What is it that he doesn't delight in? Well, lo chafatzti. Let's look at a few things. Look at Isaiah while we're right here. Look at Isaiah 57, verse 15. For thus says he who is high aloft, forever dwells, whose name is holy. I dwell on high in holiness, yet with the contrite and lowly in spirit, reviving the spirits of the lowly, reviving the hearts of the contrite. You want to know what God looks for and what he wants to dwell in the midst of? Here we go. Psalm 34:18, look up on your own. I'm going to keep moving forward. So go to 65, Isaiah 65:12. Isaiah 65:12. I will destine you for the sword. You will all kneel down to be slaughtered, because when I called, you did not answer. When I spoke, you would not listen. You did what I hold evil and chose what I do not want. Psalm 40. You can't hold me accountable to the time when we were down, so don't look at your watch like it's time for Lubies yet. Psalm 40, verse 6. You, O Lord my God, have done many things. The wonders you have devised for us cannot be set before you. I would rehearse the tale of them, but they are more than can be told. You gave me to understand that you do not desire sacrifice and meal offering. You do not ask for burnt offering and sin offering. This is David. Psalm 40, right? Temple, the sacrifice system, not the temple, but the sacrificial system. And he's told, this is not what you desire. Olah v'chata, burnt offering, whole burnt offerings and sin offerings you didn't ask for. Look at Psalm 51. Psalm 51 and verse 16. And the verse number is different in Hebrew and English. Let me make sure. It's verse 18. You do not want me to bring sacrifices. You don't desire burnt offerings. Now, who is this? David. Does David understand God? Is he a man after God's heart? Does he realize that God does not want sacrifices? He's saying that. This is what he's saying. Go with me to Micah, the prophet Micah. Now, again, I know there are people who are going to say, yeah, but you got to read this verse and this verse. Stick with me. Chapter 6 of Micah, verse 6. With what shall I appear before Jehovah? Do homage to God Most High. Shall I approach him with burnt offerings? What about a calf, year-old calf? Would Jehovah be pleased with thousands of rams? Line them up. With myriads of streams of oil, shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He's told you, O man, what is good. And what does God require of you but to do justice, to love loving kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? Yeah, but what about a sacrifice? But what about the blood of bulls and goats. Don't you desire that, God? Hosea chapter 6. Hosea chapter 6, verse 6. For I desire goodness, chesed, and not sacrifice, obedience to God rather than burnt offerings. Chesed I desire, saith Jehovah, v'lo zavak, and not sacrifice. Now, people are trying to reconcile things in their mind. I see it. I can feel it. People think, yeah, but you can't say, I don't desire sacrifice, and then say, unless you have your ducks in a row and you're doing it the right way. And it's not what this means. V'lo zavak. God, what do you desire? Chesed, v'lo zavak, and not sacrifice. 1 Samuel chapter 15, 1 Samuel 15. Quite a few more texts, but we'll go through them quickly. 1 Samuel 15 and verse 22. Samuel said, does Jehovah delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, or the obedience to Jehovah's command? Surely obedience is better than sacrifice, compliance than the fat of rams. God's delight, chafatz. Does he desire, olah, v'zevak, burnt offering and slaughter? Is that what he wants? Or rather to listen, to attend to? Proverbs 21:3 says that rather than zevak, Proverbs 21:3, rather than zevak, it's tzedakah and mishpat, righteousness and justice. That's what God wants. It's a good thing because it's been 2,000 years, right? Look at Psalm 50. Some of you are thinking, we were in Psalms, why didn't you tie those together? It's less flipping. I do this because they're tied by context, not necessarily convenience. Psalm 50. I love this one. Verse 7. Pray heed, my people, and I'll speak, O Israel, and I will arraign you. I am God, your God. I censure you not for your sacrifices or your burnt offerings made to me daily. I claim no bull from your estate, no he-goat from your pens. For mine is every animal of the forest, the beast on 1,000 mountains. I know every bird of the mountains, the creatures of the field are subject to me. If I were hungry, I wouldn't tell you. For mine is the world and all it holds. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of he-goats? Sacrifice a thank offering to God and pay your vows to the Most High. Call upon me in time of trouble. I will rescue you, and you shall honor me. God says, I don't need bulls and goats. I don't drink the blood. I don't eat the flesh. If I were hungry, I wouldn't ask you to help me. Isaiah chapter 1. Isaiah 1, beginning in verse 10. Hear the word of Jehovah, you chieftains of Sodom. Give ear to our God's instruction, you folk of Gomorrah. What need have I of all your sacrifices, says Jehovah? I am sated with burnt offerings of ram and suet of fatlings and blood of bulls. I have no delight in lambs and he-goats, that you come to appear before me. Who asked that of you? It's a strange question. Trample my courts no more. Bringing oblations is futile. Incense is offensive to me. New moon, Sabbath, proclaiming of solemnities, assemblies with iniquity I cannot abide. Your new moons and fixed seasons fill me with loathing. They are become a burden to me. I cannot endure them. And when you lift up your hands, I will turn my eyes away from you. Though you pray at length, I will not listen. Your hands are stained with blood. Wash yourselves clean. Put your evil doings away from my sight. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Devote yourself to justice. Aid the wrong. Uphold the right of the widow. Defend the cause of the widow. Orphan rights of the orphan. Defend the cause of the widow. Now, a lot of people say this has to do with insincere worship, Ross, because it mentions Sabbath too. You trying to say the Sabbath isn't, no. Read it closely. What is it that he says? Who asked this of you? Now, their Sabbaths had become corrupt as well. Their holy days had become corrupt as well. They had mixed it with other things. They had mixed the pure with that which was not pure. Jeremiah chapter 15, remember, if you can pull the pure from the profane, the polluted, what is it that you want to pull out of that muck and mire? What had been added to? What had crept in? Most people believe that Isaiah 1 is saying if they simply get the right attitude and they quit mixing the little bad worship with the good worship, then everything will be fine. And listen, there are verses which seem to suggest that. My question is, should we not question those based on everything else that we're reading? Because we have to say it's been 2,000 years that the cult has been gone. Now, a lot of people try to dismiss this plethora of text which seem to suggest that God doesn't desire sacrifice. He doesn't desire it. How do you not desire something and desire it at the same time? And people will bring up some of these texts which obviously are pro-sacrificial Levitical literature texts as if I haven't read these and considered them. I have. But the preponderance of evidence from the text suggests that God does not drink blood and eat the animals that they bring. That God does not need, want, or desire that they should bring these sacrifices. It also suggests, the preponderance of evidence, that it is not required to attain forgiveness. It has never been required, and it's not now. And it's a good thing. I would say, carefully consider and ask yourself, did God ask for, need, want, or desire animal sacrifice? Does this cult originate with Moses? Jeremiah says in chapter 7 that God didn't ask them anything, didn't tell them or command them about sacrifice and burnt offering when they left Egypt. That's the wilderness period. Is that true or not? Now, people say, well, I take the Torah over Jeremiah. Okay. All right. What about Amos chapter 5? Why would Amos ask the question, did you offer sacrifices to me in the wilderness? Was it part of the Sinai revelation? Are they of divine origin? Go with me to Ezekiel chapter 20. Ezekiel chapter 20. Is it off again?
Nope.
Okay. Ezekiel chapter 20, I want you to look at verse 23 with me. However, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would scatter them among the nations and disperse them through the lands, because they did not obey my rules, but rejected my laws, profaned my Sabbaths, and looked with longing to the fetishes of their fathers. Moreover, I gave them laws that were not good, and rules by which they could not live. Now, I just want to take a minute. God is speaking. He says, I gave them laws that were not good. You know how many fights I've been in over telling people the laws are good. No, some of them aren't good. No, I'm telling you they're, well, Jehovah says that he gave them laws that were not good. And rules by which they could not live. Now I wonder if we can figure out which ones he's talking about. Let's keep reading. Moreover, when they set aside every first issue of the womb, I defiled them by their very gifts, that I might render them desolate, that they might know that I am Jehovah. This is talking about sacrifices. In context. Now, in most translations, it says, so that I might horrify them. So God wants to give them laws that aren't good, commandments that they can't live by, to shock them, to horrify them. Now, you know what people do? By verse 31, it talks about making your children pass through the fire. A lot of people say, Ross, that's not talking about sacrificing like your goats and all. That's talking about children's sacrifice. Oh, yeah? Did God command them to kill their children? No. Did it ever enter his mind? Read Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 30 and following. Not only did he not command them not to kill children, it never even entered his mind. So that's not what he's talking about here. But the context says that the bad laws and laws where you couldn't live by were given by God. Now, the only ones that I can think of that you can't live by right now are the ones dealing with the sacrificial cult. Just an idea. Some suggest various readings, but again, we have to consider what is it that God gave that wasn't good. It's been 2,000 years since the cult was in operation, sacrificial cult. Tents, shrines, temples, all gone, altar, gone, fire out. Without temple, without priesthood, without sacrifice and offerings, without a king, the world has been forced into a place where the only way to approach God and seek forgiveness is with the words of their lips. Hosea chapter 14. Hosea chapter 14 says, Return, O Israel, to Jehovah your God. You have fallen because of your sins. Take words with you and return to Jehovah. Say to him, forgive all guilt and accept what is good. Instead of bulls, we will pay the offering of our lips. Your offering is that which you bring from your heart, expressed through your mouth. The mouth is not good enough. You can't just confess. You have to turn from your bad and seek that which is good. Seek justice, seek righteousness. V'lo zavak, no sacrifice. You couldn't do it now if you wanted to. You've heard it said, if we could but rebuild the temple, start again the sacrifices, God's glory would be manifest and all would be right. But I say unto you, if a temple is ever rebuilt, it better be a house of prayer for all people. And if you desire to bring a sacrifice, it ought to be the words of your lips. I believe that any attempt to bring back the external trappings present in the sacrificial cult into the modern world will result in the same path as all previous attempts. Don't say the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord are these. Turn to Jehovah and call upon him as a father and He'll forgive your sins. You will put yourself on a path at His direction, and He'll take you in His arms like a loving parent. Nothing else needed. No partnership with a cadre needed. Go straight to God. Call upon His name. Those who call upon the name of Jehovah shall be saved. The ends of the earth will know. Every knee will bow to Jehovah, Hu Elohim. Nothing else is required. No blood, no flour. Chesed v'lo zevak. Shabbat shalom. Have a great week. Join me next week. Same time, same channel. Have a beautiful week. And for those who missed parts of this class, I'll edit it and post it later.